On the 20th of December 2025, I woke up suddenly at exactly 4:52 in the morning. Not slowly, not drowsily, I startled awake. And as clearly as I've ever heard anything in my spirit, I heard two words: 7 May. It was not an audible voice outside of me, it was inside me, clear and firm and unmistakable. I remember lying there for a second, staring into the dark, completely confused. And then I actually laughed a little and I said, "What, Lord?" Again, I heard it. 7 May. Now, there was absolutely nothing significant about that date to me at that time. No plans, no birthday, no event, nothing. But it was so specific, and I was so unusually awake and alert that I physically got out of bed, took my brand new 2026 diary, turned to the page for 7 May and wrote down the date, the time I woke up, and what had happened. And then life carried on, or at least I tried to, because shortly afterwards my entire world began to shift. Business became incredibly difficult. Things were not unfolding the way I had hoped. There was uncertainty, emotional pressure, financial pressure, and this growing sense that life as I knew it was quietly coming undone beneath my feet. And then came the decision that shocked even me. After 31 years in Johannesburg, I would leave. 31 years. And 23 of those years were spent in my townhouse I had bought and built my life around. Even now, I still cannot quite believe I did it. Because when you live somewhere for that long, your identity becomes stitched into ordinary things. The roads you drive every day, the traffic lights you stop at without even thinking, the familiar shopping centers, the coffee shops, the shortcuts, the radio stations, the rhythms of the city. For me, so much of my life was tied to the entertainment industry, the SABC, the radio studios, the television studios, the makeup rooms, the bright lights, the waiting areas before filming, the sound stages, the endless hours on set. And then all the location shoots, driving out before sunrise to film on dusty roads, farms, tiny towns, office buildings, restaurants, schools, shopping centers, wherever the production needed us to be. Entire pieces of my life are attached to physical places in Johannesburg. There are roads I cannot even drive down without remembering a scene I filmed there. Buildings that still remind me of wardrobe fittings or rehearsals or callbacks or auditions, makeup artists laughing in crowded trailers. And then there was my gym, my beloved gym. The familiar faces, the routine, my trainer, the feeling of belonging somewhere without having to think about it. And woven through all of that was my coaching work too. Even though most of my sessions happened online, Johannesburg still felt like the center of my working life. My clients, my routines, my familiar environment. The knowledge that my entire professional identity had been built there over decades. It is strange how safety can come attached to geography. I arrived in Johannesburg 31 years ago as a young actress, not knowing a single person. I had dreams, ambition, fear, excitement, and absolutely no idea what my life would become there. And now suddenly, 3 decades later, I was wrapping my entire life in newspaper and bubble wrap and cardboard boxes. It felt surreal and deeply painful. People often speak about obedience as though it is instant, peaceful, and triumphant. But sometimes obedience is emotionally exhausting. Sometimes you obey while grieving. Sometimes you obey while confused. Sometimes you obey while your nervous system feels completely overwhelmed. There were moments during that season where I genuinely felt shell-shocked. The admin, the packing, the endless decisions, the uncertainty, the emotional weight of leaving behind an entire version of my life, even though I was looking forward to going to my new home, to being with the people who were already there. And underneath all of this quiet disbelief, I cannot believe I'm actually doing this. But deep down, beneath the fear and the exhaustion and emotion, I knew God was calling me to the Western Cape. Not because it made logical sense, not because it felt comfortable, but because somewhere deep inside me, I knew. Originally, I was supposed to leave Johannesburg on the 30th of April. But then came a severe level 6 storm along the N1 highway towards Bloemfontein, which was the first leg of my trip. The weather conditions became dangerous enough that traveling that day simply was not safe. So suddenly I couldn't leave. But everything had to shift by one day. And instead of leaving on the 30th of April, I left on the 1st of May. Only afterwards did I fully realize the significance of that. The 1st of May 2026, it was exactly 31 years to the day since I first arrived in Johannesburg to begin my life there. Exactly 31 years. Arrival and departure. Beginning and ending. And of course, beginning of something new. And somehow, even the full moon fell on the 1st of May 2026. Cycles closing, one chapter quietly ending while another began. The more I reflected on it, the more I realized something profound. God is a God of order, even when our lives feel chaotic. What I first experienced as an interruption was actually alignment. I finally arrived in the Western Cape on the 3rd of May. I was exhausted. Not dramatic exhausted, really exhausted. Emotionally, quite disoriented, I must say. Physically, I was depleted, still unpacking boxes, still trying to process the fact that my entire life had changed. There was no big, triumphant feeling, just silence, fatigue, and that strange emotional numbness that sometimes follows enormous change. And then the 7th of May arrived. The date I had written down months earlier in the dark at 4:52 in the morning. That day, from my new office, in my new home, I saw my 2 first paying clients. Not before the 7th, on the 7th. And then suddenly, everything inside me went still. Because back in December, when I laughed and said, "What, Lord?" God already knew. He was already there. He was already in May, already in my future, already preparing provision, already preparing continuity, already preparing the next chapter while I was still completely unaware of what was coming. I think sometimes we imagine God only speaks through dramatic miracles and enormous signs. But often, he speaks quietly. A date, a prompting, a stirring, a whisper in your spirit that makes absolutely no sense at the time. And sometimes obedience feels terrifying because you cannot yet see what God sees. He sees the big picture. You only see the storm, the goodbye, the uncertainty, the packing tape, the exhaustion, the grief of leaving behind a version of yourself you've known for decades. But God sees the 7th of May. He sees the provision and the continuation. He sees the people waiting for you. He sees the next assignment, the next season. And perhaps that is what this entire experience taught me most deeply. God is already in our future. Sometimes all he asks us to do is trust him enough to write down the date.